Okay, so guys, right now I'm gonna read the article of our dear fellow Ukrainian, Prometheus UA, about the patch that you see on the screen. This is the patch of the 92nd Brigade, and that's the last version of that patch. At first glance at the patch of the 92nd Brigade, I doubted whether I could gather enough information for a full-fledged article. How wrong I was. It turned out there was actually a huge amount of information, and I found it difficult to start writing precisely because of the challenge of choosing what to include and what to leave out. Let's begin with the history of the 92nd Brigade. This is one of Ukraine's so-called old brigades, a term usually applied to units that were created before the start of the Russian-Ukrainian War in 2014. In the spring and summer of 2014, the brigade defended Kharkiv from a potential Russian attack, but by the end of August, it had been redeployed to the Donbass. There, it took part in nearly all the largest battles and helped to halt the Russian advance. On May 16, 2015, fighters of the 92nd Brigade in Luhansk Oblast, Donbass, engaged in combat with the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group, capturing 2 soldiers. They turned out to be Captain Yerofeev and Sergeant Alexandrov, active-duty elite servicemen of the 3rd Guards Spetsnaz Brigade, a special forces unit of the main intelligence directorate, GRU, the Russian one. This incident was widely covered in Ukraine as yet another undeniable proof of Russia's direct involvement in the occupation of part of Ukraine. As always, Russia lied, claiming that they had left the army beforehand, while the Western world pretended nothing had happened, continuing its attempts to seat Putin at the negotiation table and persuade Ukraine to compromise its interests. Doesn't that sound familiar today? Some people in that same 2015 began new economic ties with Russia, starting the physical construction of a gas pipeline from Russia and making their country even more energy dependent. And this after the obvious and open occupation of Crimea. I remind you, Russia officially annexed Crimea and the hybrid occupation of part of the Donbass. Do you know who was the last one to officially annex part of Ukraine into his country? It was Adolf Hitler. Imagine Ukrainians who had heard from representatives of Western countries about European values, freedom, democracy, the rights of women and minorities, and so on. Demagogues and hypocrites with blood on their hands, because for years Ukrainians said that once that project was completed, the Russians would start a full-scale war. And we see some articles. You see, this one is Nord Stream 2 will bring corruption and war to Europe. Next one is 23rd of July 2021. Nord Stream 2 deal stokes fears of Russian aggression. Next one is year 2018. Naftogaz CEO, Russia's Nord Stream 2 would threaten Ukraine, from Deutsche Welle. This one is full-scale military aggression, because transit makes full-scale military aggression against Ukraine a very costly exercise, he said. Who said that? Andriy Kobolev, the CEO of the Ukrainian state oil and gas company Naftogaz. So this one is July 22, 2021. Merkel defends Russian gas pipeline deal without more US sanctions. Sorry for getting distracted from the 92nd Brigade badge, but the feat of a few fighters from this unit is capturing Russian special forces, and adequate Western response to that event could have changed the course of history. It's like the massive wildfires in California or Australia. They all start from a small spark that can be put out quickly in time, but without that, they grow into a catastrophe. Western inaction gradually allows the fire to spread towards them as well. Russian drones over your countries are only the first sparks. Okay, let's return to the 92nd Brigade. It has been actively developing since 2014. In 2021, it participated in the international military exercises Combined Resolve 16. They were held in Germany and were organized by the United States. Participating countries included Bulgaria, the United Kingdom, Georgia, Greece, Italy, Lithuania, Poland, Serbia, and Slovenia. So I think these are the Ukrainian BTRs, and there's also a camouflaged sniper there. I think that photo is also taken from those exercises. The full-scale invasion met the 92nd Brigade in Kharkiv, where it was a main force that halted the offensive. Later in September 2022, it took part in the highly successful Kharkiv counteroffensive and captured a lot of Russian armed vehicles, like you see in this tweet. Afterwards, a video appeared showing one of the 92nd Brigade's trophies, namely a new Russian T-90 tank, ending up in the United States. Presumably, Ukraine handed the tank to then Allied America for study. In 2023, the word assault was added to the name, and the full title became the 92nd Separate Assault Brigade. In that capacity, this unit in 2025 operated on the territory of Russia's Kursk Oblast and eliminated many North Korean soldiers there. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, the 92nd Brigade has actively expanded its use of drones. For example, from one fighter, Yuri Fedorenko, call sign Achilles, a drone unit called Achilles began to grow inside the brigade. Over time, it significantly expanded and became a separate unit. Now it is a part of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, led by Magyar. This is their patch, guys. This is their logo. And on this photo, you see the Achilles. That's the commander of Achilles. Right now it's a regiment, I guess. Maybe still a battalion, but might be a regiment already. He served together with Magyar in 92nd Brigade. And the brigade has one of the most effective drone units, the Code 9.2 Battalion. You probably have heard of them, guys. They are pretty famous. I mean, they have their YouTube channel where they explain the operations, maybe even in English. So that's a very glorious unit, Code 9.2. This unit was one of the first drone units in Ukraine, and even Magyar once studied their tactics. Now, finally, let's get to the patch. Until 2014, Ukrainian brigade patches were post-Soviet style. I don't like them. Usually they have many different images and inscriptions. Still, the 92nd Brigade's patch was far from the worst. Yeah, look at this. This is, I think, the first version of it. And shit, why does it name like some Russian name? Ropshinska. If it was Ropshinskaya, I would thought it's a Russian patch. But then it looked like this. The Separate Mechanized Brigade, it says. Still the same, not the same, but similar, pretty similar style to what we have seen on the previous one, but not that Soviet anymore. You see? With reforms after about 2017, Ukraine began creating brigade patches in the Western style, more laconic. The first patch looked like this. And apparently, in April 2025, a rebranding took place, which is the subject of Rick's current raffle. And now it looks like this. So this rebranding was made only 7 months ago, guys. That's what Serhiy from this unit that gave me this patch told me. He told me that It was changed only about 7 months ago. Roman numerals XCII, that's 92, were added. The brigade number, small marks of the Ukrainian trident, and changed green to black. At the bottom you can see a palisade. That symbolizes the defensive fortifications of the Zaporizhia siege, the capital and the military base of Ukrainian Cossacks. You also see crossed muskets. On the patch you can see them, guys. These are a Turkish type tüfek, an early Ottoman Empire firearm used from the mid-15th to the late 17th century. Ukrainian Cossacks sometimes used them as trophies and called them Yanicharka. That's how it looks. Next photo, it also features the same gun, the closer look on it, so you can see those two guns on the patch crossed. The 92nd Brigade is named after Ivan Sirko. He is a man around whom the most myths circulate. Even magic is attributed to him. In the US, superhero comics and films with extraordinary powers are very popular. There are entire Marvel and DC universes. If one were to collect everything the Ukrainian people have made up about Ivan Sirko over the centuries, one could easily create another universe about the Cossacks. It shows some creative drought among screenwriters for new ideas. Take it for free. I give it to you. Ivan Sirko was a real historical military leader of the Zaporizhia siege in the 17th century, who lived a long and extraordinary, eventful life. If you study only historians' research, he was not an unambiguously pure hero. However, professional historians say you can't judge people who lived centuries ago by the norms of the 21st century. More stories about him will follow. Some will be true, some myths. Choose what you want to believe. In the 17th century, the Ottoman Empire, today's Turkey, was at its height and occupied vast territory from Asia to Africa and Europe. And it occupied the part of Ukraine, as you can see on this map. They tried several times to break into Western Europe, and in almost all the battles that stopped them, Ukrainian Cossacks took part. The Zaporizhian siege was always democratic. They even elected their military leaders called atamans. Ivan Sirko was elected commander for decades, a huge rarity. By legend, he never lost a battle. From a young age, he began fighting mainly against the Turks. He took part several times in naval campaigns and even raided Istanbul. The Cossacks sailed on small, fast ships called chaikas. Oh, guys, chaikas are pretty famous. Look at this. They would ambush large Turkish ships and burn them. Does that remind you of today's battle for the Black Sea? A true Cossack was considered someone who had at least once participated in a sea campaign. Ukrainian Cossacks were sometimes like the pirates of the Black Sea. Although most people long considered Ukraine mainly a land country and still marvel at the successes on the Black Sea. Those who studied history know that Ukrainians always fought well at sea. It may be of interest to people from Scandinavia. You know about the times between Kievan Rus and the Vikings. I think you know what Viking ships, drakars, looked like. Now look at the Cossack ships, chaikas. Notice any similarity? Yeah, it's indeed a pretty small ship, and it looks pretty similar to drakar. Look at another photo. Well, our traditions intertwined in many things. Here's another one. I think this is a 3D reproduction. So chaika is a seagull. Yeah, that's how it is translated, and you can see it in the right bottom corner here. Warship of the Ukrainian Cossacks. Seagull. Chaika in Ukrainian. There is another one. You see the small chaikas are sinking the ships, the big Turkish ships with red flags. This one is more schematic, like the painting of those years, you know. Look at this one. Also, it gives you the understanding that it was a small ship. Of course, the vast majority of battles were on land. Some say that Ivan Sirko, together with the Cossacks, took part in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. Many historians call this war, in fact, the First World War, since it was truly global. The Cossacks definitely fought in it, but as for the story that in 1646, Sirko and his Cossacks helped France win the siege of Dunkirk. Cough, cough. Historians don't exactly mention that, but who really knows how it was? As I wrote earlier, it's up to you to decide what to believe. Wink, wink. Ivan Sirko also had a personal reason to fight the Ottoman Empire. In one of the attacks on Ukraine, they killed his wife and son, so he spent his life taking revenge on them in battle. That's why the 92nd Brigade's patch shows Turkish muskets, a reference to that fact. After his many victories, legends sprang up about Ivan Sirko even during his lifetime. His successes were explained by saying he was a charakternik. According to Ukrainian legends, a charakternik is a Cossack with supernatural abilities, catching bullets in midair, becoming invisible, infiltrating an enemy camp, moving objects with the power of thought, like in that film inspired by Mykolog Hohol's book. Look at this mysterious old Cossack and how he eats vareniki. Okay, let's see. Should be funny.
Вишь, какое диво!
That is really funny. People often said Ivan Sirko could turn into a wolf. That's why his modern portrait shows a wolf. Interesting. Inspired by these stories, the Ukrainian Special Operation Forces chose an image of a werewolf in their patch. After many wars on Ukrainian territory and Russia's predatory policies, very few intact graves of Ukrainian historical figures remain. Russia deliberately steals the remains of our rulers and warriors. But Ivan Sirko was lucky. His grave could have stayed untouched until 1967. Because of the construction of hydroelectric stations on the Dnieper River, his grave might have been flooded, so it was moved to another place. But of course, it was the Russians. They took Ivan Sirko's skull for research. From those remains, they determined what he looked like. No paintings of him survived to our time. Just imagine the cruelty in Russia of Russia's genocide, just destroying all the pictures and paintings of our heroes, of our historical figures. But the Russians did not return the skull until 1990, when one Ukrainian historian, taking advantage of the USSR's moment of weakness, a year before it ceased to exist, smuggled the skull back to Ukraine. Now Sirko's skull has been returned to its grave. There is one more story about Ivan Sirko. You probably all know the story from the first day of the full-scale war, when the Russians brought their cruiser Moskva near Snake Island and radioed a demand to surrender. The Ukrainian reply was short. Russian warship, go fuck yourself. A few centuries before that, a similar story involved the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan wrote such a letter to Cossacks. Sultan Mehmed forced the Zaporozhian Cossacks. As the Sultan, son of Muhammad, brother of the sun and moon, grandson and viceroy of God, ruler of the kingdoms of Macedonia, Babylon, Jerusalem, Upper and Lower Egypt, emperor of emperors, sovereign of sovereigns, extraordinary king, extraordinary knight, never defeated, steadfast guardian of the tomb of Jesus Christ, trusty chosen by God himself, the hope and comfort of Muslims, confounder and great defender of Christians. I command you, the Zaporozhian Cossacks, to submit to me voluntarily and without any resistance, and to desist from troubling me with your attacks. In Ivan Sirko's name, the Cossacks wrote an answer. Inspired by this story, the Ukrainian artist Ilya Repin painted a picture at the end of the 19th century. Here in the center, the artist depicted him. So you can see it now. This is a famous painting that how Ukrainian Cossacks, and their head at that time was Ivan Sirko. You can see him in the center of the painting. How they're writing a letter to the Ottoman Khan. And here is the reply, the Cossacks' letter to the Turkish Sultan. Thou Turkish devil, brother and companion to the accursed devil and secretary to the Lucifer himself, greetings. What the hell kind of noble knight art thou? Satan voids and the army devours. Never wilt thou be fit to have the sons of Christ under thou scullion of Babylon, thou beer brewer of Jerusalem, thou goat thief of Alexandria, thou swineherd of Egypt, both the greater and the lesser, thou Armenian pig and Tatar goat, thou hangman of Kamianets, thou Evildor of Podolia, thou great silly oaf, and all the world, and all the nether world, and before our God, a blockhead, a swine's snout, a mare's ass and clown of Hades, may the devil take thee. That is what the Cossacks have to say to thee, thou basest, born of runs, unfit art through the Lord it over the Christians. The date we know not, for no calendar have we got. The moon, month, is in the sky, the year is a book, and the day is the same with us here and with ye over there, and thou can kiss us, thou knowest where. Koshovy Ataman Sirko, Ivan Sirko, and all the Zaporozhian Cossack brotherhood. As I said earlier, choose for yourself what to believe and what not. No one will ever know for certain. Meanwhile, new myths appear. People say that whoever wins Rick's patch from the 92nd Assault Brigade, named after Ivan Sirko, will get one magical power of their choice. Who wants the magical power of their choice? So buy tickets, increase your chances to win the raffle, and choose yourself a superpower. Personally, I would choose the superpower to eat vareniki with the power of my mind. That's a good choice. Thank you so much. That's the end of the article. Damn. It was a pretty good article. Thank you so much.